There is always a complex navigation architecture we have used to navigate between the screens. Could be for activity and mainly for the fragment transition. But to get rid of that, Android Jetpack has provided a better way to do that. That is via the navigation architecture. And navigation architecture not only provides a better navigation between your screens, but also provides various out-of-box features. That is your animation transitions, set up your app bar or toolbar, navigation to dialog, etc. So hi everyone, this is Puneet Grover. Today we will talk about navigation architecture and how can we implement that easily, which includes various things like navigation host, navigation controller, navigation graph. Along with that, we will also discuss about how we can send the data between the screens. Towards the last, we will discuss about interview questions asked in the navigation architecture. So let's start. Now let's discuss about the navigation architecture first. As you can see, navigation architecture is used to navigate between an activity or fragment to another, but it provides a better way to do that. Unlike fragment transactions, there are few terminologies we have to use here. First is navigation graph. Now what is navigation graph? A navigation graph is an XML resource that contains all navigation related information in one centralized location. That means it includes all your individual content areas within your app, that is your destinations, at one place. If you can see here, this is navigation graph, and then we have so many destinations pointing to navigation graph. Then let's go to the another terminology, that is NavHost. Now NavHost is the one who hosts the navigation. That means an empty container that display destination from your navigation graph. And then next part is your navigation controller. Navigation controller is the one who controls the navigation, or you can say manage app navigation within your navigation host. Now let's go to the Android Studio to implement the navigation architecture. So I have created one sample project which contains only dependencies, nothing else, that you can see in your app level build.gradle. We have only two dependencies added for this. One is for fragment and one is for UI. Let's go to our main activity and close other tabs. So our first step to implement the navigation architecture is to create a navigation graph. The graph who represent all of your app's navigation path. To create the navigation graph, right click on the resources, go to the app Android resource file, select navigation from the resource type, give any name you want. For example, I am giving it as a NavGraph. Click on OK. We have the navigation graph XML here. If we go to the design, you can see here navigation host fragment is not found here. If you remember, I have already told you that we should have a navigation host fragment. That means as a container who will host the navigation. That means who will host the navigation graph. So let's go to the main activity, and there we'll go to the main activity layout and create a navigation host. Let's see how we can create the navigation host. Here we will have to add a name as a NavHost fragment, and for that we will have to give a navigation graph as well. So our navigation graph will be the navigation graph which we had created earlier. Perfect. Let's make it as a default nav host. Perfect. We have our fragment container view ready. Okay, our next step is to add the destinations. Let's go to the navigation graph. Now if you can see here, as we are using navigation graph inside the nav host, which is inside the activity main. So it is already there. Activity main, which will contain the fragment container view, which is a hosting the navigation graph like this. Now we want to add some destination. Let's say from the main activity, I want to navigate to the home fragment or some kind of a fragment. So I click on here, which is to add a new destination. Either choose the existing destination or create a new destination. So here I will create a new fragment. For example, let's give the name as a home fragment. So we have our home fragment added in the navigation graph. If you go to the split window, that means the code window. Now as you can see here, our navigation graph has start destination as a home fragment. That means whenever your main activity launches, our first destination would be home fragment, which we just created that. So if you go to the home fragment and check the layout, our layout is something like hello blank fragment. So whenever we run the application, it should show the hello blank fragment. So let's quickly remove the unwanted code here. Now let's quickly run the application and see how it works. Hello blank fragment. Perfect. We have our first navigation implemented. Now let's create one more fragment, for example, detail fragment, and let's navigate from home fragment to detail fragment. Let's create corresponding UI for that. Perfect. We have our detail screen UI ready. Now let's navigate from our home fragment to detail fragment. Now let's add one button here. We will click on this button to navigate from home fragment to detail fragment. Let's enclose it inside layout tag. This is for data binding. Let's go to our home fragment and then access our views. Again, private, let in where. Perfect. We have our home binding. Let's keep the value. Now let's use here home binding dot root. Let's put a set on click listener. Now our problem statement is to navigate to detail fragment. How can we do that? Navigate to detail screen. We have to use navigation controller here. That means nav controller to control the navigation. Now how can we do that? View, that means it dot nav controller. Nav controller, find nav controller. Perfect dot navigate. Here, how can we do that? It asks for action. Now to make it possible, we will have to go to our nav graph, and here we have to add one more destination. As you remember, this nav graph is a combination of destinations. Let's add one more fragment here, that is of course detail fragment. Give it an idea as detail fragment, close it. Okay, let's give a label. Label means the title, top title of your screen. We have our detail fragment and home fragment. Now how can we navigate to another fragment? There is one more concept here, that is actions. We will have to use action to navigate to different screen. Let's give ideas, for example, action from home fragment to detail fragment. And what's the our destination here? Destination is detail fragment. To navigate from one screen to another screen, we have to use actions. Action is the one which actually specifies from which screen we want to navigate to another screen. Here we have to add a destination and give a ID of that action. Now this ID which we have created here will be used when we navigate to this one. So let's say our ID was r.id.action home fragment to detail fragment. That's it. We don't have to do anything extra. Now let's go to the detail fragment, and here we will just do a basic setup. We have our detail fragment layout. We'll have to add layout tag here, add init where binding. Okay, let's run the application and see how it works. Okay, we have our button navigation to detail. Let's click on that. Awesome. We have our detail screen. That means detail fragment is there. This is how we can navigate from one screen to another screen. Now, very important and basic next step here is how can we send the data from one screen to another screen. This is pretty simple. we'll have to follow a few steps. Go to our navigation fragment. Now we want some data to send from home screen to detail screen, right? In that case, if you remember, we had to use arguments when we send data between the fragments. So the same thing apply here. We'll have to use argument. Argument could be of any type, and we can give it as any name. For example, I want to send a username and I want to send string type. So we have our argument ready. Now, two things here which is very important. One is argument type here specify that it will be type safe. Okay, so type safety is ensured by the navigation architecture. Earlier, when we were using fragment transaction, there could be possible cases that we are sending string, but we are expecting some other data type. In that case, it may lead to app crashes. But here navigation architecture ensure at compile time that whatever data type is expected, same we will send. Okay, so now there are two things which we will have to do. One is to add dependency at global level, that is your navigation SafeArgs dependency, and second is in your module level build.gradle add one plugin for SafeArgs Kotlin. There are two very important things here. Listen carefully. One is whenever we send data from one screen to another screen, the screen which is originating or the center screen, this will be converted to, for example, home fragment will be converted to home fragment directions, and the one which is receiving the data, for example, detail fragment class, that class will be appended with args, detail fragment args. Let's see how. Now we want to navigate to detail screen with arguments. This is a very important concept, so don't miss that. Let me comment that out, and I again want to navigate to another screen on click of this button, which I just told you. We have our class that is home fragment directions because it is sending the data. Now here we have action which we had created, action home fragment to detail fragment, right? This action which we had already created. So this action will help to navigate to another screen. Now here what this is expecting? This is expecting one argument to navigate to another screen. Here like this one, username. Our argument name is username. Let's say I'm sending it as a Puneet Grover. Now let's keep it in a variable. Well, action again, then the same thing. It dot NavController dot navigate and then action. Simple. You don't have to create any bundle. You don't have to put that in arguments or anything. We just have to create one tag with this argument, have to explicitly tell the argument type, and then we have to use the already created action tag to navigate to another screen. But this action now will contain the argument which we had created. Now this is how we can send the data. But how can we receive the data? This is where we want to receive the data. Now which I just told that for receiving the data, it changed the file name to file name plus args. For example, detail fragment args. So this, let's use delegates here. Perfect. We have our arguments here. Now very simple. Just this one dot username. That's it. We have our value here. And set the data as fragment detail binding dot set text hello username. Now let's run the application and see how it looks. Now again we have our home fragment. Click on this one, hello Puneet Grover. So that means we have sent our data from one screen to another screen. Pretty simple. So this is it, guys. This is how we can implement the navigation architecture. Now, most importantly, widely asked interview questions. Let me tell you what's that. Okay, so these are the important questions which is widely asked. First of all, the terminologies, which is NavHost, NavGraph, NavController, which I have already told you. And then we have how can we send the data between one fragment to another fragments, which also we have seen. And then which is very important, that is what is pop-up to and pop-up to inclusive. Okay, I'll give you a brief idea, but I'll ask you guys to Google it and see how it can be done. Now, what is pop2? So pop2 itself says that it is popping something. Now, obviously, we are using destinations in terms of navigation architecture, then it should pop only the destinations. So yes, we can optionally pop any additional destinations of the backstack. This is what pop-up2 means. For example, if your app has initial login flow, right? Then once a user has logged in, you should pop all the login related destinations of the backstack. So whenever user press the back button, it doesn't take user back to the login flow. This is where pop-up 2 comes into the picture. So our next question is what all things we can do with the help of navigation architecture. I have already told that we can configure our app bar, we can configure our animate transitions, we can configure our navigating to a dialog. So these kind of things can be done with the help of the navigation architecture. So thank you everyone for watching this video. I hope that you have got good insight on navigation architecture and you will be able to implement that very easily. But still, if you have any questions, feel free to write down in the comment section. Also with that, I would like to request, please share this video with your friends and colleagues so that they can also learn navigation architecture. So keep learning. See you in the next video. Bye bye.